Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Conversations with Cobb. My name is Joe Nagel, and I'm a property consultant with ECI, and I am the MC for tonight. I'm joined with our host, Mike Cobb, and our special guest, Grant. But before we turn it over to them, I just want to remind everyone, if this is your first webinar, we do have a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Now is a good chance to find that and feel free to ask any questions you have, maybe before, if you've been following us for a bit, or if anything comes to mind as Mike and Grant are talking. We will get those answered live, so feel free to post them. We've also done a lot of other of these conversations with Cobb around various other parts of the community, and as well as other webinars about Nicaragua specifically. So a lot of great content, but with that being said, find that Q&A box. It's always takes a second for people to ask the first question, but once they are asked, then it gets going. So with that being said, welcome everyone again. I see people are just joining here now, but I'll make another announcement as we get closer to the Q&A. But for now, I will turn it over to our host, Mike Cobb.
Good, Joe. Thank you very much. Grant, really nice to have you on with me today. This is going to be a fun conversation. So
yeah, it's great to be here, and apologies in advance for the light show that's happening. The sun is starting to go down, and it filters through the trees and our blinds, and I enjoy it, so I don't do a lot about it.
No, it's good. That sunshine's a wonderful thing. So anyway, but I do see the light show aspect. That's nice. Yeah. Before we went live, we were just commenting on the woodwork behind you. It is absolutely spectacular. This is your home at Gran Pacifica.
Yes,
and
it is.
This was all very custom made hardwood furniture, closets and insets and doors. It is spectacularly beautiful. You do have a wonderful home there. So
it is. The woodwork in general that we've seen here in Nicaragua is really fantastic and really amazing. And they have access to solid wood, everything, so we very rarely will see any kind of laminates or some other engineered woods, for example. I think every house on the property right now has solid wood cabinetry, with maybe one exception.
Okay. And you know what, before we launch into the EMF side of things, which is where you've been focusing your architectural efforts, one of the elements that we've talked, I had Kathy Cook on here last week as part of the conversation with Cobb, and she's a building biologist, and EMF is one of the components, but there are other components. There are mold issues, but there's also the off-gassing on things like laminates that you were talking about. And so, maybe at some point, let's wade into it, but I'd like to come back and talk about building materials later with you, if we could, in the conversation, because I think those are very relevant as well to the healthiness of the homes that are being built there as well. So, so Grant, why don't you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about your background and who you are, what you do, and then how you ended up at Gran Pacifica, please.
Sure. I am a licensed architect in the United States, in the state of Hawaii. And a number of years ago, my wife and I decided that Hawaii was just too expensive for us to live in, and we wanted to see more of the world. So we found a way to basically work online, become digital nomads, and started traveling around the world a bit. And through our travels, we eventually ended up here in Nicaragua. We found Gran Pacifica, and we've been here for nearly 3 years, and it's been really, really outstanding to be here. Yeah. As part of our adventures, I guess you'd say, we already were aware of problems with EMFs, and we never had Wi-Fi in our house, and we tried to hardwire everything. And but when we started traveling, we did start to notice other things really that we were finding we were sensitive to. And so, like a lot of people on this call, maybe we went through all the different rabbit holes of looking at all the different types of products, what might be causing our problems, what might be able to help us. And we've looked at stickers and holographic devices and orgonite and shungite and things that you plug into the wall that should harmonize your environment, all the way, the whole gamut. We've looked into all these kinds of things. So even though I'm not actually a building biologist, I do have sort of a general understanding of a lot of these features and ideas that we need to be considering when we're designing houses. And in fact, when Kathy Cook, the building biologist, was down in Gran Pacifica doing the initial testing, we hired her to come and test our house also as a just sort of an offside private thing. And you know, a lot of the things that we had already done in our house vastly improved the conditions. And if there were a few things that we could fix, but I think in general we were able to speak the same language and we were on the same page with a lot of things. So it's I'm not just some architect who suddenly appeared and was asked to do this project. I actually have background and some knowledge that is going into my ability to design the houses that we've created for the model homes for this project.
Absolutely. You talked about traveling around the world, and I've heard your wife, Sasha, talk about some of the challenges you had when you were renting apartments and then finding out that there was a 5G tower literally across the street in a bell tower of a church, right? And so I think that you've experienced this, you and she together have experienced this and really tried to figure out better ways to organize your life so that you wouldn't have to deal with this. So
yeah. And traveling is always difficult if you haven't been somewhere in the first place. If you're just booking something on Airbnb, I heard that recently people are asking that they add a section for low or zero EMF or EMF numbers at least, and that didn't exist when we were traveling around. So we did at least once or twice lose an entire month's rent because we showed up to a place and just couldn't stay there. We'd be there for half an hour, run some tests, and then we just had to leave and abandon it.
Right.
But that's just what you do to stay healthy.
Correct. And it's nice that they're actually adding that component to the Airbnb, right? And one of the things that you've been working on, we're going to jump around a little bit, but we'll get maybe to the meat of things in just a moment. But one of the things that you've been doing is you've been working with some of our folks there to identify ways to take some of the, I'm going to call them traditional homes, but even a traditional home at Gran Pacifica in Nicaragua, it's made out of concrete block. It has a very high level of attenuation as part of its physical characteristics. But taking some of the traditional homes that have been built and working with some of the methodologies and technologies and materials to actually improve those for folks who do come to visit, right? And maybe you could just chat on that for a second, and then we'll dig into the kind of the meat and potatoes of the construction methodologies. So
yeah, sure. Like you said, the general construction that we use for the walls of the houses in Gran Pacifica tends to be concrete and concrete block, and in general it does a really good job of blocking quite a bit of the signals that we see coming from outside. And for our house, for example, between the interior and exterior we had a drop of about 90%, somewhere between 80 and 90%, depending on exactly what the signal is. If it's coming from a neighboring house who might have Wi-Fi, or somebody walks by with a Bluetooth signal or something, it obviously fluctuates throughout the day. But we're always trying to find, at least for this project, we're trying to find ways to improve that. So we've devised a sort of a test of, if we can change the wall, if we can add something to the wall, very not changing it entirely, but just adding another layer into the assembly of the wall, can we improve our attenuation significantly? And so we're in the process of sort of designing that test and starting to build the parts and pieces, getting the right manufacturer reps to come out and make sure that the plaster, for example, is installed correctly. And we're testing it not just for EMFs, but also for physical durability, to make sure that by adding something to the wall, we're not creating a failing point in the wall. So we want to give you a home that's going to last for a long time. And just because we add this feature to it to help with the EMFs, we don't want it to cause you a maintenance issue in just a couple of years. So we're trying to do our due diligence for making the best walls that we possibly can.
Right. And you're going to do some testing of standard wall as we build it now with the concrete block, but then also adding that extra shielding in there as well. Right. And that'll be done before we begin construction on homes, of course. But you have also, I think, identified ways to take an existing home and further reduce the EMFs that penetrate the home. Maybe you could just talk about that, because I think we've ordered some things to actually kind of re-outfit a couple homes so that when people come to visit, they can really have that much healthier environment to be in.
Right. in terms of the existing houses, one of the biggest issues we see, at least with the ones that have some sort of solar capabilities, is with dirty electricity.
Yep.
And so we've ordered some filters and a meter that goes with the filters, so that when somebody, especially for this project, wants to come down and visit and stay somewhere, we can go and we can check that house and try and reduce those dirty electricity levels as much as possible before they show up. In addition, the weak point of any wall system is the openings in the wall, which is all the windows and doors, and those tend to be the places where we see the EMFs coming in. It provides very, very little shielding without extra treatment. And so we're looking at ways that we can deal with those openings, and we've got 3 or 4 methods that we're going to start investigating to figure out what is the best option for these houses as a whole. And we're going to do some of that testing on existing homes, so we get a real good baseline. And there's always sort of leaking points in a house, especially where the roof and the wall comes together, or again where the doors and windows are. And so using an actual home as a test case, it gives us a better idea of what it'll look like, how it will actually perform in real life when we build an actual house.
Right. And even for folks who, obviously the short term, come visit, stay for a week, whatever, a month, check things out, right? But as we move into the development of this new neighborhood, it will be 16, 18 months from start to giving somebody the keys to their home. And so I think a lot of people have already expressed interest in living at Gran Pacifica while their homes are being built. And so what we figure out for these short-term stays would also be, things that we could implement in a home that somebody wanted to rent for a year or 2 until their home was built. So it really is a very good test to really set the standards for how we deliver a product, short-term, but then obviously long-term in the homes. Let's move to the long-term for a second. You worked with Kathy Cook, the building biologist, very, very specifically on home design, because you mentioned dirty electricity a moment ago. You talk about the different shielding aspects and things like that. Why don't you talk about how you actually designed the layout of the home to really maximize the healthiness of that home from, all kinds of EMF, whether it's the, external, but and internal dirty electricity and other types.
Yeah, so in the first place, the biggest sources that we see of EMF causing issues or products that cause issues within a home, it's always the routers, Wi-Fi, if you have it turned on, and generally large appliances. And so we've strategically designed the houses so that the refrigerators, the washing machine, the location of the electrical main breaker box are all located on a wall as far away from the normal living areas as possible. So where the head of your bed is practically the opposite end of the house from where your refrigerator or your washing machine might be. And the same for your living room. So those areas where you're going to spend most of your time, most likely, most people, where they'll spend most of their time, they're going to be at a good distance from those appliances. In addition, those appliances are placed on an exterior wall, so you'll never have the option or the possibility of having your, a refrigerator backing up against a wall with a bedroom on the opposite side. That does not exist in the layouts that we've worked on for these homes.
Right, and those are some very simple things to design in. I mean, I'm not saying that the designs are simple, but very simple things like putting things on an outside wall, putting enough shielding in between the various appliances and panel box, right? So,
and just physical space between things.
Right.
In addition, these are model homes, so it's different from a custom home, because I don't know necessarily how the person who's buying this home, is going to use it.
Right.
Some people love to use air conditioners, and I have to say that my wife and I are those people. We have the air conditioners on, not all the time, but quite often. But there are other people who love having their doors and windows open all the time, and they love the fresh air and the breeze that blows through no matter what the temperature is outside. And so trying to design a house that works for both of those types of people and everyone in between, we've placed windows in as many places around the house as possible. So you do get a good amount of light if you're the air conditioner type person. If you're the natural airflow type person, you should be able to get really good cross flow no matter which direction your house is oriented on the site, and that should be a really good situation for people.
Yeah. Well, and just talk about the site for a second. You and Sasha went out early on, even before we really had done any clearing or anything like that. You spent time out there. You took measurements. Just talk about that for a minute, because you're right. The windows are the opening for breeze, but they're also the weak points, as you called them earlier. So talk about the site just for a minute, because I think that's important for people to understand that it doesn't have to be a kind of a foolproof wrapper, right? The site itself has very, very low readings. Maybe you can talk to the technology of that for a minute too, right? Some of the specifications.
Sure. So the location of the site it's basically in the forest. It's a giant forested area. It's not too far from our existing infrastructure and roads that it becomes cumbersome to actually build the project. But it is like, you don't have to go very far into the forest to find a very, very safe and low EMF zone. And the first time we went out there, there's sort of like a horse trail that exists, and we were walking along that, and just, you feel differently when you're being there. Even as good as our house is, we still have devices and things in it. And but going out into that forest, you feel suddenly open, and it's a totally different experience. And even within the ISLA site, it didn't matter where we went for this proposed area, it all felt really comfortable. Nothing felt overly sort of damp. Like, I didn't feel like there would be any kind of moisture issues with mold or things in the future. It felt very dry, very clean. And then when we came out and did the real testing with Kathy, not that we weren't doing good testing ourselves, but we validated that, and Kathy came out. It was the same thing. She's walking around, she's got the meter on with full volume, and she's like, it's so quiet out here,
Yep.
And it's just, the meters tell you that yes, the numbers are low, but you can also feel it in your bones and in your skin when you're just walking around. You don't need a meter to tell you that that is a really healthy place to spend time.
Right. Well, let's talk about lifestyle just for a minute. I mean, we're kind of segueing into that. You've lived there for almost 3 years now. You've really established yourself, as part of the community. And maybe you could just talk about, just what it's like to live there, and what are some of the things that you enjoy most. By the way, you can also like something you don't like, right? I mean, because look, there's no such thing as perfection, right? There's, roses have thorns or whatever. So, just lay out what you like, some of the things you may not like, but let's try to, give people a sense of what it's actually like to live there. Right?
Sure. So as with anywhere in the world, every place has its pros and cons. I'm sure that the place you're living in right now, there's things you like and things that you don't like. And it's really a matter of finding the place where you can deal with the things that you don't like, because the things that you do like are so much greater or so much more valuable to you.
Right.
And I think this is something that we really learned in our travels as we went around the world. We learned, like, I can do things here that wherever it might be, I can do things here that I can't do back in the United States, or I can do things in this country that I can't in that country. And so it's a different sense of freedom. And then that applies also to your just sort of day-to-day life. And here in Gran Pacifica, it's at least an hour drive to get to the edge of Managua. If you want to go to the airport or some of the more popular areas, it's about an hour and a half drive. So you have to understand that this is kind of a rural environment practically.
Yep. And,
to deal with that, a lot of people go into Managua to buy products, to buy groceries and whatnot. But we've worked really hard with some of our neighbors to start getting farmers to come in. So we get a farmer that comes, an organic farmer comes in every Friday, and he takes pre-orders and brings everything that he possibly can for us. And then every 2 weeks, there's another company that sources from all different farms, and they'll either pick up from some of the stores within Managua for us, and they come every 2 weeks and deliver things to our house. So it's even possible that if you don't want to go to Managua for your day-to-day things, you don't have to. The downside to that is that some people get kind of cabin fever being out here. And so it's good to just go for a drive. Sometimes we'll just go over to one of the neighboring communities and find another restaurant, or meet with one of our friends, spend some time there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of things to do here in Gran Pacifica, and we've got golf, and there's a grass tennis court, and obviously swimming and surfing and things of this nature. The people who are most happy here are the ones who like to take advantage of those things, or the ones who understand how to keep themselves occupied when they're in their house. Because if you're coming from a city and you're moving out here, which is basically country, you are going to sort of be homesick for going to a coffee shop, or walking down the street to a bookstore or something else. And because we're sort of in a rural environment, it's much more difficult to do. And so the people who, like, I work online, obviously my wife is doing an online master's degree program. So we've found ways that are really good for us individually to keep ourselves occupied. And that keeps us much happier as well being here. And honestly, that's the case for anybody. If you're planning to retire and you don't have a hobby, you need to find one, even if you don't move to ISLA.
Yep.
Or Gran Pacifica.
Right. And it's funny, a lot of people come down, and I mean, it's on the beach. Obviously, you've got, miles of Pacific coastline there that you enjoy. Your dog enjoys. I think having a pet, I mean, I think that's really a great way to engage. You're out with whiskey in this case, right?
Yeah.
You're out meeting people, you're doing things, but yeah, that's really good advice, Grant, that if you are retiring, or you are retired, having a hobby that you can bring with you to a rural environment, and it is rural, is critically important for quality of life and satisfaction. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um,
And there was a question that came up on a previous conversation with Cobb. I think it was the first one. Someone asked if you needed a car. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that.
Please.
If you're, it's a good idea to have a car, because again, if you get a little bit of cabin fever or start to go a bit stir crazy, then having that car, the freedom to get out, is really handy. At the same time, we have a whole list of drivers who are available with vehicles that you can rent them and their car for a day. They'll drive you around wherever you want for a minimal fee. In addition, on property, a lot of people have bicycles or golf carts, motorcycles, rather than driving a full-size car or a Land Rover or something, which are very popular down here. You don't have to drive such a big car around property, and it's really convenient to zip around in your golf cart.
Yep. One of the topics you put on a list of things to cover, and I'll touch on this, and then maybe we'll take some questions and answers if we think of other things to talk about. The immigration issues, the residency issues, I think that's a good one to touch on. So maybe you could, at least open that up, and then we'll see where we go with Q&A.
So immigration and residency is really on a case-by-case basis. And if you're retiring, it's much, much easier than I think any of the other types of visas that you can get.
Right.
Everyone we've known who has gone for the retirement visa, once they put their application in, it's been approved within 3 or 4 months. And that's really fantastic. For some of the rest of us who are working or investing, it tends to take a little bit more time, a little bit more paperwork. But I think that the process is becoming a little more streamlined. I think there was a huge rush of people during COVID times, or people who got stuck here because the flights got stopped. And so I think there was a big rush of people putting in applications for residency, and that happened to be around the time we put ours in. So ours took quite a while to get done, but it did get resolved, and we do have residency at the moment. But I think that that's a bigger topic for perhaps another webinar in the future.
Could be its own conversation. We can get a couple of the lawyers on here with us that could really talk about the process and the procedures very specifically. So
yeah, I think that'd be a really good idea.
Yeah, Joe, make a note of that. I think that would be a tremendous conversation with Cobb. We'll get a couple of lawyers, or at least one lawyer on here to do that. I don't know how we're doing for questions. Joe, if we have some, let's wade into those, and yeah.
Certainly. Well, if you don't mind, I had one come in via email before the session, but the gentleman was asking about specifically with regards to the roofs for EMF blocking. I know you mentioned that between the roof and the wall could be a little bit of an issue in terms of, some leakage or whatever the right terminology is there. But what do you have envisioned for these homes for the roof specifically?
So for the model homes, the roof assembly is a steel structure, structural tube steel welded. And then on top of that is an aluminized steel, corrugated steel, which is similar to like a galvalume. And then on top of that is terracotta barrel tiles. So the metal roof, the sheet metal, the corrugated sheet metal itself provides a really good sort of reflective surface for EMFs. And then the barrel tiles are just protecting that metal, making sure that it doesn't get exposed to UV rays or too much moisture for corrosion purposes. The treatment on that steel is such that it doesn't really rust anyway, even in marine environment. But the barrel tiles are both aesthetic and they help to maintain that and give your roof a longer warranty or a longer durability. But the metal itself does a really, really good job. And luckily here, we don't have a lot of signals coming from the sky. We don't have satellites really sending signals down to us. So it's a pretty good system. And the other houses, wherever I've lived in the world that have had metal roofs of some sort or other, excuse me, have all had really good attenuation properties.
Yeah. And Grant, I was going to say this earlier, but you are an architect. You've worked with Kathy. If somebody didn't want one of the model homes, you can certainly design a home to somebody else's specifications or desires for them, correct?
Certainly, if that was their desire, absolutely. And we've had people also who have bought a lot, done a custom home themselves with a local architect near them. And then they send the drawings down here to make sure that they meet the Nicaraguan codes. And in the same type process for this project, if you wanted to do that, send a home down here, we could help you to make sure that it also has the similar type EMF properties, protection properties that we're putting into the other homes. We can start to add that into a house that you might have designed for yourself. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into one of the first questions. Someone asked about why we don't build 4 and 5 bedroom homes for this community. It's not that it, isn't doable. Like Grant just said, you can build custom homes in this community. We just want to make sure it meets the EMF guidelines that Grant and the building biologists have put forward. But that's I'm one of 7 in my family, so I come from a big family as well. So I understand where you're coming from, but I just want it to be known, Grant designed some models, but there's always custom homes.
Well, and some of the home sites were specifically made very large to accommodate much larger homes. So that's probably the perfect combination to pick a home site, then have your architect or have Grant design a home that meets your needs and specifications. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And this is always the challenge with designing model homes is you can't hit everyone, so we try and hit a bulk of the market, and then we can even take an existing design and add more bedrooms to it or add another floor and make that 4-bedroom house if that's what you're looking for.
Yep.
Certainly. I have another question, and maybe Mike, you could address this too. With regards to residency for driver's licenses, is that also coming with residency, or can an English speaker get a driver's license without residency, or how does the driver's license perspective work in all of this?
Well, you know what? It's been so long. It's been about 15 or 16, maybe more than that, years since I went through that process. I actually don't remember it. Grant, do you know? And by the way, if you don't know, Joe, you can certainly find out from one of the attorneys and get that information back to the person. But I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think that you're not permitted to get a Nicaraguan driver's license unless you're a resident, unless you have a formal residency. They don't seem to have any issues with you driving around with a foreign license. Like nobody, in the couple of times that I've been pulled over for one reason or another, they've never asked me for like an international driver's license in addition to my normal license, which might expect if you're coming from the US going to Europe or even to Mexico. They might be looking for that, but not here in Nicaragua.
Yeah, in my experience, that it didn't matter, what license you had for
Right.
anyone. But it's a good question. Let's see if we can find out the technical answer to that. I am curious.
Certainly. Okay, well, our next question has to do with the wiring of the homes, and they ask whether or not the wiring in the homes is shielded in metal or inside metal conduit.
Yeah, the intent is to use MC cable, and which is a metal clad cabling system. It's not exactly conduit because it is flexible, but we are planning to shield all of the wiring that's within the house, and then to also make sure that the runs are going through appropriate areas, so it's not under the slab, under where a bed might go. We're trying to route it around those areas just in case there is an issue, or and even if it's metal clad, it still creates some sort of frequencies that you want to try and avoid. So we're trying to push those to the best places possible within the house.
Great. Okay. And then also continuing on the construction methodology, rebar, will that be used? They've heard that rebar and other metals can amplify EMF frequencies. So is there any concern with that, or how best to mitigate that?
The primary structure for the houses is reinforced concrete, and that's sort of columns, beams, window headers, and sills. And I don't have any issues in our house, for example. Our house is constructed that same way. And I think the thickness of the concrete itself is helping enough that the rebar doesn't really make a difference. Plus, the foundation for the home is down in the ground. And so we have some grounding capabilities, or the possibility to ground some of that rebar. We haven't done that before, but it's something that's worth looking into.
Yeah, and the important thing about the rebar is that we are in a seismic zone, right? It's the same as California and right, the whole West Coast along the Pacific. So that engineering standard has to be met to have a structurally sound home in a seismic zone. Maybe there are alternatives to rebar, but I think your comment about seeing how it could be grounded might be a great answer. But if that was a concern, just work with Grant specifically, and we'll see if there's an alternative. If there is, great. Or if there's a way to mitigate that, fantastic. But if not, maybe a different construction methodology, right? We've talked about yurts. We've talked about some other construction methodologies that would not necessarily have to have rebar in order to be structurally strong and stand up to the seismic. So there are probably some other building methodologies that could be implemented in that zone as well, because again, it's already very, very low. In fact, there's a report. I hope that many of you have downloaded the report that Kathy Cook put together. It's her full report of all the readings across the different areas. They're very, very low, so that the concrete construction, while it adds to the mitigation, it's already very, very low. So other construction methodologies might be appropriate for somebody concerned about the rebar. So that's certainly something to talk with Grant about, specifically look at that as an option.
Yeah, and part of the wall test that we're planning for, as we discussed at the beginning of this call, part of that I was looking at trying to ground a portion of that wall assembly. Okay. And we'll see how well that works. And if that does work, then that's the kind of thing that might wrap and envelop the entire house. And then the rebar would be inside and theoretically wouldn't be conducting any new EMFs other than the ones you're creating yourself.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so there's another question, which I think we touched a little bit upon last conversations with Cobb with Kathy, but this has to do with the geopathic stress. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she mentioned that can be looked at, but that's not something we have at the moment looked into specifically for the homes. But I know Kathy had mentioned that she had some colleagues that specialize in that, so that is something that can be done if needed. But that's not something we've done at the moment. But
right.
certainly an option.
Yeah, and when she and I were walking around taking the measurements when she first arrived, she didn't really notice. I mean, we weren't specifically looking for it, but we didn't notice any issues with any of the trees that might be representative of a source of, or a point of geopathic stress. There was one spot, one tree that she was like, "Oh, what is this? It might be a problem," but it was just a termite nest, and it looks like a sort of growth on the side of a tree, but it was totally natural, not because of some sort of ley line or other energetic thing happening with the earth.
Okay, so another question, it's kind of more of a comment, but maybe you can comment on it after, Grant. I plug my mobile phone into Ethernet with an adapter. I would like to have as Cat6 cabling throughout the house with Ethernet plugs as plentiful as electric plugs.
So we're definitely putting Ethernet cables from the main router point in the house into each room. And right now we're planning for one drop in each space. But if you wanted more than that, we can certainly do that for you. What my wife and I do is that we've got one point, for example, in our office, and then from that we have an Ethernet splitter basically that breaks off into 6 or 8 different connections. So we can go to my computer, her computer, phone, and whatever else we might have that we need hardwired in that room. But that's definitely an option, and that's something to talk with your sales rep about.
There's another question asking about costs for a 5-bedroom home / house. I know that might be hard to give specifics, but Mike, maybe in your experience, with some of the other homes, I know you've built a few homes there, or designed a few homes, or Grant, if you want to touch on that, but any ballparks or numbers or estimates you could give just to get a better idea.
Let me just kind of wade into it and say that when you add bedrooms to a home, you're adding some of the least expensive square footage, right? Kitchens are very expensive. Bathrooms are very expensive. You've got plumbing and cabinetry and lots of things going on. Bedrooms generally are, walls, right? Now, if you have a 5-bedroom home, you may want an extra bathroom as well, maybe in, whatever. So I don't know that there's an easy way to answer that question, but if it was simply to take a 3-bedroom house and add 2 more bedrooms, that's the least expensive square footage to add. Grant can certainly look at that with you, look at some different designs, and probably give you a fairly good estimate of what that differential between, say, a 3-bedroom home and a 5-bedroom home would be. I think some of the other elements would be all on one floor, 2 stories. Some of these variables, change the cost of construction favorably in your way, right? If you build a 2-story, you might have to have a stronger foundation, but you have less roof structure. You have common roof structure. So there are variables that have to kind of get mixed into that. But Grant, any additional thoughts on that? I don't know, or specifics?
No, you're absolutely right on all of those points. It really depends on the general design of the house and how you want it laid out. And if you've got something that you want us to price, a general layout or something, then we might be able to work with you on that. But like Mike said, it really depends on what type of space that you're trying to add and how the house is shaped.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. That's all the questions I see at the moment. If there's any other last questions people have, feel free to put them in. But any other topics you want to address, Mike, while we wait for some other questions?
I don't think so, Grant. I always like to just kind of give you a chance to, talk about anything we didn't cover or whatever. This is your conversation. So, yeah.
Well, let me just add one more quick thing before Grant. I saw one more question come in about getting the report that Kathy did. Instead of going and searching and trying to find it, we're going to send out a follow-up email with the recording of this session. So I know a lot of people couldn't attend live, they're in various time zones and it's middle of the night for them, but we'll send out the recording. We'll also send out that report as well, so you can look through it. If you have any questions, certainly let us know. We'd be happy to get those addressed. But yeah, Grant, I think the last comment is yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really, really exciting project, and not just because we live in Gran Pacifica and want to see it be improved, but this is the type of project that is key for where I think the world is going in terms of architecture, design, and healthy living. And so it's really exciting to be involved with a project like this. And I hope that people are really excited about it as well. And the thing with Gran Pacifica is that no matter how many photos or videos we post online about this place, it doesn't do it justice. You really need to come and see it. I highly recommend that you come and see it. Even if you're planning to buy something anyway, like come and see it before you buy it, and find out for yourself, ensure it for yourself that that's what you really want. And I'll be here, my wife will be here, and we can talk with you about the project and answer any questions you have. And we really want to meet more people, and especially people we can help.
Well, Grant, I think they're so excited. We did get a few more questions in your
Good.
last little, couple sentences there. So let me just address some of those. Someone asked about Kathy's interview. If when we send out the report and the recording to this, you want Kathy's or Karen's or some of our other resources, just reply to that email and let us know. There's a question about cell phone usage. I don't know if we want to address that specifically here or, more.
Sure. Yeah, look, it's a great question. In fact, it's a very important question because, Grant is designing homes to protect people who are inside the homes from excessive EMFs and, dirty electricity. And that's all wonderful. But if the moment you step out of your home, everyone's walking around with cell phones and wireless routers flying around everywhere, like it defeats the whole purpose of creating a healthy space. And so this neighborhood specifically is designed as as much as possible EMF-free zone. Cell phone use in this neighborhood will be prohibited. Wireless, no Wi-Fi, routers, things like that. So that will be part of the covenants and restrictions that come with the title. Those rules will lay with the land. And so you are buying into this presumably, and you agree to it, right? But if the next buyer comes along and doesn't agree to it, what's the protection? Well, the protection is the rules actually lay with the land. And so the next buyer is likewise obligated to, honor what we're establishing, which is a very safe, healthy place for people to live. So it's a great question. I think it's important. Grant, you are helping, you and Sasha are helping to really figure out what those rules and regulations of the community, standards would be. So maybe you want to add to that a little bit, or yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And in addition to it being with the land, it's with the entire neighborhood. So even the community areas that are planned for this area are also cell phone free neighborhoods areas. And we're planning to make sure that private gardeners and security guards and other people understand that that's what's happening also, so that when they do venture into this neighborhood for work or other reasons, that they know to turn their cell phones off or in airplane mode, or find another means of communicating. And so we're doing our best to make sure that this is really a clean environment in every way. And then a lot of people down here communicate with WhatsApp, which I know is a Facebook-owned sort of social media chat program that we use. And they recently came out with a desktop version. So I don't have my cell phone ever any longer, because I can sit here and work and it's just here next to me, and I can chat with my neighbors or whatever might be going on. So it seems like there are certain things that are happening that are actually to our benefit for what we're trying to create in this neighborhood, that you're still going to be able to interact with the other people in Gran Pacifica the way that we normally would, but you don't have to use your cell phone.
Yep. Tremendous. Well, Grant, thank you. We're really, really fortunate to have you as part of the team, Sasha as part of the team as well. But I actually think we're far more fortunate to have you as part of the community, and you've really integrated so well. You've really sunk your roots at Gran Pacifica, and it's wonderful to see that. I look forward to seeing you not this Sunday, but next Sunday for another game night at Chip and Sue's. That's always a fun event. I know you're doing some potlucks as well. And you guys have jam sessions. I know you get together down at the bar and you do jam sessions. Just people show up and play. So lots of cool things, and you're at the heart of much of that. And that truly makes Gran Pacifica a wonderful place to be. And I thank you for that maybe more than anything. Obviously, what you're doing for this project is critically important as well, but the bigger community really appreciates all you're doing to make it feel like a home for people. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I can't take all the credit for that, but
We'll give
you
some to
know,
Sasha. Yeah.
Sasha's
And
got
whiskey.
some of our other neighbors definitely are contributing as well. And we're all working really hard to make sure that this is a really fantastic place to live. And actually, to that point, I know that we were just wrapping up, but I want to point out that I've never, perhaps when I was very young, lived in a neighborhood where everybody knows everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people these days, especially if you live in a city, you live in an apartment, you don't probably know the person who lives across from you because your doors are closed all the time and you're in your devices, not necessarily the people on this particular phone call or watching this video. But you know, coming here, we literally will be like, well, let's just go for a walk. We'll walk down towards the restaurant to watch the sunset, and then we'll end up having dinner with a dozen neighbors.
Yep.
Because everyone's there for the same reason, and we all enjoy spending time with one another. So the community itself is actually very, very strong, even if it's not the size of a city. And that might be to our benefit, really, that it's not a lot larger than it is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We'll be doing this again. Some notices will go out for the next conversation with Cobb. I'm not sure who will be on that. We may maybe have more of a round robin one of these days where we get Karen, Grant, and Kathy all on together. It may largely be more of a Q&A, right? In fact, maybe that's a good idea, Joe. We'll send out an email saying, hey, you know, send your questions in. We're going to do something with this group of folks. And then we'll just have it be sort of the Hollywood Squares, everybody answering questions and see where it goes from there. So again, thank you, everybody. Grant, thank you very much. And Joe, thanks for pulling it all together for us.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.